Okay, hello everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar, this CASACADEMY, in fact, on our second edition of the Elevate study of CASACOM. I'm Marie-Josée Gagnon. I'm CEO and founder of CASACOM, and I'm here with Randy Lynn and Jason from our Toronto office. Jason will share the mic with me. So I'm very, very pleased to see the interest that it generated by our study. You have to know that we launched our first edition last year when we celebrated our 20th anniversary. We were wondering how to contribute more to our community of professionals. Well, there was no study, no annual study at least, or even studies on our work, on our reality. So we thought, well, this is our contribution. So we did it in Ontario and Quebec, where we are located. So what you'll find here is data, objective data, but also a very, very, let's say, unique vision of PR and communications. You know, we at CASACOM, we have a lot of ambition for you and for us. And we really, truly believe in the value of the work we bring to organizations. So you'll see all that today with Jason and I. So Jason, let's go.
Well,
and of course, there'll be questions, right? There'll be questions at the end. So let's go.
Absolutely, and it's also a bit of a discussion. If you please send through, questions during the presentation in the chat situation, we can create a little bit of a dialogue here. And also, if you've got any questions, like as Marie just said, this is our second survey, but it's not really going to be the end for us. This is something we want to perpetually do every year. So think about the survey, think about the results that you read, and send us over any questions that you think we should add that should be part of next year's study that we do into the same category, the same folks. So, but yes, as Marie-Josée said, let's get right into the 2022 CASACOM Elevate study. So first of all, the question comes down to who is it that we. So we looked at about 177 public relations and communication leaders, both in Quebec and in Ontario. Now, for more than 4 out of 5 respondents, we were very, very happy to see that we were at the director and the VP level. We really have captured the point of view of the industry's leadership. Now, the industry is growing, but I don't know if you're recruiting right now, but we have several positions open here at CASACOM, and we can say that PR pros are very, very sought after right now. Our industry is in very high demand. So having this level of feedback from the heads of communication companies in Ontario and Quebec really gives us some great insight into what happened this year. Now, before we start though, get into our further insight, I was wondering, Randy, if you could start up a bit of a poll. We'd like to get your thoughts on what your biggest communication priority is at the moment. We're going to compare it with the feedback that we got from the survey, just a little bit of feedback. So Randy, if you could pop that up.
All right. Here we go.
Choose one. Choose wisely. Time is counting down. A little 5 seconds left. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, let's look at what we've got here. Outreach on digital platforms, internal comms, media relations, employer brand. You know what? Things kind of fall within the same realm of what the priorities are that we had found in our survey. So again, adding greater fuel and fire of the credibility of what it is that we've got going on here. Let's take a look at what the top.
Oh, sorry.
The top priorities have been. Okay, so overall, communications priorities for this year. At the top of our respondents' priorities, you're going to find digital communications and social media. So we asked ourselves, okay, well, why is this? Well, you can control the message, and quite frankly, it's where more and more of us are spending our idle time. And there's a huge potential to shine the light on your offerings and to recruit, sell, and increase your credibility as well. It's also extremely targeted. So when used correctly and in combination with a full digital ecosystem, including your website, your newsletters, engaged in your PR and Marcom strategy, you're able to reach audiences that you want with your messages instead of just blanketing some potentially disinterested eyes. And it's the same thing when you're thinking about executive positioning on LinkedIn. You know, you found the right tone, you found the right frequency for posting, but you need to engage an expert who is up to speed on the platform's evolving algorithms so you can get the full benefit from that platform. And so it's not really a surprise that digital communications is really at the top of our leaders' minds. The second priority is media relations. Now, pre-pandemic, change was afoot, and now media relations is a whole new world. Newsrooms have never been so small. Outlets continue to close on a regular basis, and sections that used to be just for entertainment are now selling their space. And there's real news in the world to compete with. Not that there never was, but there's some serious news that has to compete with. And again, we have such a small audience, but you have Hockey Canada, who is just dominating the news. The war in Ukraine is a continual story that's ongoing, and COVID has not gone. All of this means that getting journalists' attention is harder than ever, and media relations tactics have to be far more sophisticated. There's still something to be said for that third-party credibility, that third-party endorsement. But now our goal is quality over quantity, and it's getting in front of the right audience with the right story. I call it getting your message to your masses. And what we see is our clients have recognized the role of amplification and credibility that media can bring, but they also see that it's not enough. We cannot just rely solely on potential media visibility. It's far too risky, and it's pretty fragile as well. Secured content needs to be shared, and that's externally via all owned media channels. And that recruitment can benefit from that kind of coverage. And internally, employees' morale and their pride in their company can also benefit. So in short, we need a 360 approach to maximize any results that are secured. Now, third point is brand and strategic positioning of the company. Now, our prediction is that this will increase next year. We talk about employer branding a little bit later on, but a strong brand becomes a major asset to help a business stand out in a saturated market and to help it meet the expectation of its shareholders. Move on a little bit here.
Before we move on, there are two comments in the chat.
Great. What have we got?
Oh no, those are two notifications. Those are from before. Okay, I will change the screen.
Do we have questions, Randy, or should I carry on?
You can carry on.
Okay, great. All right, so on to the next slide. Looking at essentially the budget that's been allocated. Digital budget has kind of stayed the same. Now, this is interesting. We pulled this one out specifically because we know there was a very big increase in 2021, and that was with the pandemic again. Much attention was paid to digital as it was really where businesses had the ability to communicate directly with their audiences, since the media, as we said before, are small and were under siege with story after story about COVID-19. Now, we see this slowed or stalled with the majority of respondents who told us that their budgets had stayed the same. Now, what's changed is how it's being spent, though. It, too, is moving to quality over quantity. It's possible that many leaders have moved from big sponsorships to more targeted opportunities where they can build awareness about their brand or their ideas, moving to content that's not just about being part of the conversation, but actually telling the stories that are important to their organizations. And comms leaders want to be ensured that every single post is either there to support a business objective. It's not about just being there, it's about cutting through the clutter. And if it's not related to their business's themes or their objectives, be pretty ineffective. Move forward, Randy. So now this is our favorite slide, really. It's called external support. So external activities or outside support is still essential to Quebec and Ontario communications leaders. Now, 3/4 of respondents said they are looking outside for support, which is pretty consistent with last year's results. But why? Well, labor shortage has not helped. As mentioned off the top, we are in high demand. Recruiters agree that HR, IT, and comms are among the hardest to recruit for right now. Now, outside sources offer a different perspective or an outside view into the business or a problem. And it's the problem that the companies are facing, but they need somebody else to give that thought, give that different perspective. And we can strip away some of the vain reasons that organizations are seeking awareness to help them find and get the most from their communications activities. Most organizations are going to hire 1 to 3 generalists to build their comms team, but will those folks have the expertise that they're needing? They're going to have the expertise in employer branding, internal comms, spokesperson coaching, ESG strategy, or digital marketing. This is where it becomes advantageous to call on external expertise. Randy, speaking of expertise, you can see that roughly 3 roughly equivalent areas for external firms are used. Now, considering our earlier slide, the most popular external services partially line up with what the organizational priorities are. Again, media relations is becoming more and more strategic and surgical, and it takes someone who is doing it on a regular basis to stay up on the pulse of the changes in outlets, in people, and approaches to get the best out of the activity. As for government relations, this is an ongoing practice for many companies, and sometimes it's the initial reason comms team were brought in-house. But this position on this list could suggest a little bit more. Again, I talk about a pandemic, but of course it's massive. But a lot of holes in government policies and procedures were exposed during this time. And this focus can be the result of the need to address those issues. Or there's also companies who are looking to implement ESG strategies, and that in some cases may require change. And they may be looking to influence their leaders to make those changes impact. On the digital side, if you really want to have impact, stand out, develop content that supports a business strategy, many turn to specialists. And again, it's that outside opinion. It's the ability to produce creative that you may not have. And like media relations, it's also for the expertise. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about employer branding. Before I do, a little survey. Well, you can pull that up for us, Randy.
All right, should be on everyone's screen. Give you about 15 seconds to answer. All right, 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so you can see that yes, the majority of us are currently working on employer branding strategy. We have 75%. And to continue the strategy next year, right, 88%. All right, well, let's look at our numbers here. Because the funny thing is, if you're not working or thinking about working on an employer branding strategy, which the majority of you are, so kudos, other people need to ask themselves why not work? Because historically, employer branding has been the responsibility of human resources. And Brandy, you can pull up the next slide. But what organizations are seeing more and more is that brand of the organization, the brand of the actual organization that needs to be put forward. Positioning your employer brand is much more than just doing HR marketing, finding a slogan, and distributing photos of your employees. It also goes far beyond the scope of the salary offering for employees. It starts with an in-depth audit and interviews with key employees and understanding what attracts them and makes them stay. Then there's a lot of work to align these distinctive features with the values of the organization, its mission, its vision, and its objectives. And that's when the messaging starts to become consistent. That alignment happens when all employer branding efforts support the positioning of the actual organizational brand. Hence the importance of bringing comms people into the circle. At CASACADEMY, actually, we are in the process of completing our revised employer branding, and it's important to me. We always say that the shoemaker's children go shoeless, but essentially for me, it's important to me that the shoemaker's children have some of the best shoes on the block. You can keep an eye out on our social media feed to see the results of our own process in the coming weeks. So when asked why employer branding is important, well, number one choice is for recruitment. Number two is for retention. Makes absolute sense. But you should not have one without the other. It's also important and can contribute to retention and the ability to facilitate an understanding of the company's vision, mission, values internally. look to the next slide. Something about how imperative it is that comms and HR work together on employer branding files. And this is the majority of the case with our two fair provinces. The other key element is the involvement of senior leadership. And as we can see, senior leadership is involved in this greatly, with 85% of respondents telling that they had senior leaders involved. And then the budget. Budgets increased in more than half of the companies that we've surveyed, but internal communications budget doesn't seem to have kept up. And that's a challenge because you need to bring the employer brand to life. Unfortunately, many organizations deploy the information on their website or their Indeed page or LinkedIn. Do they do it internally? Do they have an ambassador strategy internally? Have they implemented comms tools that allow the employer brand to evolve? Has the content been created to immerse and engage employees around the values and mission? Without the employer brand, there can be a loss of meaningful connection to the actual employer. And the employer brand helps to shine a light on the meaning of the company and the meaning of the work that they're doing. This is the reason why it's absolutely important, especially at this time, to make sure that people not only are being retained, that they are being recruited, but also to ensure that they are engaged with this. I'm going to stop there on my discussion, and I'm about to pass it over to Marie-Josée to talk about ESG, but are there any questions popping up? Or again, feel free, we can talk about them after.
Thank you so much, Jason. So if there's question, we'll take them at the end. It's more, maybe it's a little bit more convenient with this format of Zoom conference. So I'm very pleased to talk about ESG, my favorite topic. You know, let's simplify it. ESG, environmental, social, governance factors, but it includes, of course, some very in-depth CSR, corporate social responsibility, or sustainability program. It's really one of my favorite topic, and the reason why is that this is the best form of PR because it's really proactive and deep management of relationship with your most important audience. But before we go further, let's ask a question, Randy, please.
All right. It should be on everyone's screen. Give you another 15 seconds. Okay, 5 more seconds. 4, 3.
Stop here. It's going to be perfect. You know, I love stats because the results are exactly the results of our study of 177 people, you know, with the group that we have today. So let's go to the other one, which I can control, I think. No. Okay, so yes. So 50%, like you, have implemented the ESG strategy. So 50% of our respondents. 37, no. Not yet, I would say. It's more popular in Ontario by far, you know, 68%, 45% in Quebec. And there's also been an important increase in the last year in Ontario of 11%, and it's been stable in Montreal or in Quebec. This being said, it's not exactly what we've been noticing at CASACADEMY. There's no week that passed by without a client asking for an ESG strategy for our ESG strategy team. So, you know, I'm not sure, quite frankly, but this being said, I have to kind of believe a minimum in the data. If we go to the next, I also wanted to point out the fact that we found something very special again this year, because out of the 50% who have an ESG strategy, publish a report. And you know, ESG is really about accountability. So if you don't publish a report, it's a little bit like it's not complete. The exercise is not complete. This being said, it's not necessarily at the beginning of the ESG strategy that you publish a report. So that's why we kind of tolerate this answer. We understand this answer because, you know, people are putting their strategy in place right now and they're implementing it. And we know how demanding it is. And we prefer having a very, very profound strategy and a very, you know, well thought strategy with a report later than the reverse. This being said, at CASACAM, we have well, it's not a report, it's a certification that we had recently. A few weeks ago, we were a certified B Corp, and it's kind of a report in a way, but it's more a certification. That's another step. Another data that I wanted to point out is that for 35% of the respondents, the ESG approach, evaluates the overall performance of the business, which is a great news because ESG is really global. It's how a business is conducting business, you know, conducting its activities, in fact. So it's global. It's the overall performance. It's not just one thing like, you know, any social statements or donations to foundations. It's broader than that. So we really like that data. The other thing that we wanted to see is how much the PR com team is involved in the strategy of ESG. And what we found is that only 47% of the businesses that we surveyed have the PR and the com involved in the strategy itself. 75% are involved in communication of the strategy, and 34% are involved in the disclosure. So the reporting, like we just discussed. This is interesting, but I just want to point out the fact that be very careful if you are promoting ESG strategy without being involved in the strategy itself, or without being involved in the implementation of the strategy. Be very careful about the data that you're promoting. You don't want to be accused, your business doesn't want to be accused of greenwashing. The other thing that we surveyed is, why are you doing ESG? And well, everybody, like 66%, you know, vast majority said because they wanted to convey their values. A lot of our clients will say, well, you know, we do that because it's the right thing to do. Even before feeling the pressure from their stakeholders, they will say, well, I feel it inside. It's important for me to do it. So we love that. You can see right after at 10%, it's to improve their public image, their reputation. 7%, it's to meet investors' requirements, and we see that a lot with our clients. And the last one is to engage with external stakeholders. The budget, we spoke a lot about the budget earlier, but so let's talk about the ESG. So, you know, Jason was saying it moved. Well, it increased in ESG like it did in the employer brand. I'm just wondering towards which activities, because since our respondents are more involved in the communication of the strategy, I'm wondering, is it the communication budget towards ESG that has been increased rather than the one regarding the strategy and the implementation of ESG? This is not clear. This being said, I'll take the good news of that increase of 67%. Also, the barrier, of course, it's a big undertaking. It's a huge commitment, you know, starting and implementing a ESG strategy. And there's unfortunately a lot of barriers. So what we've noted is that the very first one is to make it a priority. You know, really say, this is where we're doing it. You know, we have all those things that are super important in our operations, but we have to do it. So Make it a priority is the first one. The time commitment is huge, and just organize yourself to collect the data. Internal, external is, like I said, a big project. There's also a barrier regarding the clear positioning and bold, smart goals that we noted for 16%. And the accuracy of the data is a challenge as well. The last two, I was surprised that they were tiny for our respondents, because it's really something that we are feeling, that there's a lack, that we're observing as well. There's a lack of expertise. We would need hundreds of thousands of experts in ESG in Canada and the US right now that we don't have. This being said, we really feel like there's a movement toward that, and we're very excited. And we really want our client to start doing it, even if it's not perfect, because the last thing you want to do is to implement a ESG strategy in a hurry. That would be really counterproductive. The last slide on this section is diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a new question we brought this year. We wanted to know if you were incorporating DEI principles in your communications. So we see in the first table here that for everything that concerns images and videos, you do at 90%. That's great. When we talk about writing, there's a big difference between Quebec and Ontario. Quebec is at 70% and Ontario is at 95%. And being a French-speaking person, as you can notice, I can understand why there's a difference there. The French language is much more gendered. It's really more like complicated when you talk about a women, a man, and in the middle or outside. Others, it's really, it's very complicated. So there's many ways to do it, but it's still big effort. So we do it at CASACADEMY in French and in English, but I think companies will have to make a lot of effort to get to that 95%. So we'll be monitoring that in the next years. Another favorite topic of mine is the place of PR and comm in organizations. And what we're looking for here is evidence of influence. So we'll talk about that. But to start, I have a question. Randy?
Should be on everyone's screen now.
So do you plan to increase your PR comms staff next year?
All right, we'll do 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
56% yes, 44% no. You're a little bit different than people we surveyed. So let's look at what they said. Sometimes. Sorry, I'm trying to change the slide. Yes, I did it. So in the last 2 years, what we've observed is that 56% of our respondents have seen their team grow, okay, compared to remaining the same for 39%. For next year, 60% believe that the size of their team will remain the same, and 39 say it will increase. So it's absolutely the reverse. I just want to mention that I see 3 reasons for that switch. The first one is it's probably people our respondents at least are conservative, cautious, because last year they did the same thing. They said, oh, it's not going to increase that much, and finally it did. So it increased more than what they thought. The second reason we think is that the recession-related headlines have an impact on the way we see our team in the near future. And finally, if it's tough to recruit, maybe we don't want to recruit. So that's our interpretation for now. Maybe you have more to share on that. Annual budget, I'm coming back to the budget, but as an overall budget, I just want to point out the fact that in general, what we've noticed is that budgets are increasing at 38% for 38% of our respondents, while resources are increasing at 56% of our respondents. So you see that resources in PR communications are increasing more rapidly than budgets. And, you know, at the end of the day, what I want is evidence. And I think money talks. And one of the things that I will be looking forward to see grow is budget over time in our, you know, that in our, I don't want to say department, I want to say, you know, team, PR and com team. The last one is, I'm very excited about that. You know, we've seen that for 81% of our respondents, PR and comms are represented on the exec committee, management committee. So very pleased to see that. Also, in 75% of the organizations, the most senior PR or com representative will make representation at the board of the business 3 times a year. That's great. Finally, we still need to be recognized more, because for 36% of our respondents, our work is not sufficiently recognized. But I want to end with a positive note, because for 60% of our respondents, they feel like it's sufficiently recognized. So our conclusion, you know, basically what we've seen this year is really the digital and the social media, digital communication, social media, that remains very popular. The employer brand, that is the approach of choice to engage and to attract, engage, retain employees, and it's really becoming necessary. Despite mixed messages, maybe a little bit on the ESG, the budgets are increasing, and we see that it's changing. It's becoming much more strategic for us. And finally, I really like what I've just mentioned. You know, I see there's a big influence of communications, teams in companies. I'm just wondering if it's your analysis too. So we're done with our presentation. We want to hear your questions. We would like to have a conversation with you. Please tell us what you have in your mind right now.
I think we actually have a couple of questions in the chat that have come
Wonderful.
up. And so we can have they're coming up as anonymous. So if this is you, put your hand up and I'll connect the ability for us to have a dialogue. But so the first question is, can you speak more to the depth of available talent in the market? I can't find a skilled media relations pro. We need both experience and expertise. Are fewer people going into media relations? I hate to spend more on paid sponsorship editorial, even if the lines are blurred. Who was that? Put your hand down. In the meantime, I can jump in on this one. Yeah, you know, the idea of media relations professionals have started to fall by the wayside. It goes back to probably around 2016, where there was still a dearth of communications opportunities, and you were getting a lot of newspapers, all media were starting to pick up more, even consumer stories. And so they weren't necessarily in-depth business stories, but they needed to fill the pages. They needed to have the content. So they were starting to accept more direct communication and promotion of products and retailers in the case of what I was working on. But as you saw, when the pandemic hit, you started to have to go back to, pardon my age and my aging myself here, but you started to have to go back to really creating stories, something that's absolutely valuable value. That's not necessarily a vanity project, but it's something that you're going to offer support, insight, expertise to that journalist to help them build a story that's going to be of interest to their readers. So I would say that media relations professionals, people who do it specifically, are probably in the more senior category than junior folks. And it's something that people have not been doing as regularly. Even our clients are not looking for it as often as they used to. And so, yeah, you're starting to see that it is hard to find good people. But it's also, you got to make sure you've got the story. That's the big thing. If you've got the story. Spending more on paid sponsorship is if you're looking to really just promote your brand and get your brand out there. You're looking to really get content that is engaging and about your brand and can give back to the journalist, give back to the reader. You have that kind of story in your organization. Yes, media relations is still viable.
Jason, I want to complete. I really like that you took that question because you're a media relation expert. I used to be. What I observe is that it's very difficult. It's a very difficult discipline. You saw it in the study. This is what you want, and this is what you pay for when you go external. So it's a very difficult. You don't want to do it. You pay for it. So it's very difficult, and there's a reason why. It's because it has become very difficult. Also, on top of what you're explaining, Jason, is the fact that there's less and less media, and less, it's less journalists. So very hard to get their attention. And when we saw that happening at CASACADEMY, let's say 15 years ago, we said, hey, let's find ways to reach our clients' objectives with other means. We do a lot of media relations still today, but I can tell you that there's so many other means that we put in place to make sure that our clients are reaching their goals. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be in the Globe and Mail. You want to do something else. You want to raise your visibility. You want to raise your sales. You want to increase your credibility. So there's so many other means to do that.
Right. We have a second question here, and please don't stop. Send them all in. Our budgets here it says our budgets also include headcount, but what would be an effective agency retainer? $25,000 a month?
Of course, but it depends, right, Jason?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the answer, that's exactly the answer. It's going to depend. And to be able to make a blanket statement of saying, yeah, that's a good retainer, as Marie-Josée said, it comes down to defining what your ultimate goals are. You know, I said vanity of being in the Globe and Mail, but is that the actual goal of your business? What's going to be successful when you are a marketer? What is actually the success that you're going to be measured against? What is the success? What's keeping your CEO up at night? What are the things that your business needs communication-wise? Because it might just not be media relations. It might be greater communication with your direct clients. It might be a greater push through your employees to get them to be talking more about the company. So it depends really on what your goals are, and that's going to define the amount of effort that you're going to be putting in and the volume, the dollar that you're going to be applying to it. $25K is a fantastic budget, but again, it's just to be determined what it would be used for.
All right. Is there any other questions? And please don't hesitate to take the mic. Is there anything you would like to raise before we go?
Pop up your hand and I can allow to talk.
Otherwise?
Doesn't look like it. Looks like we're all good.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for attending this CASACADEMY on our second edition of the CASACAM Elevate study. Very pleased to have you here. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Randy Lynn. And have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. And again, if you have any other questions after this, please feel free to send them our way. We are more than happy to answer. And if you didn't see something on this survey that you did want covered, or you have a question about that, let us know because we might include it in the 2023 version.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.